This is a short video from the ONS looking at family spending in the UK for 2010. For a transcript, email info@ons.gov.uk. We are going to look at the whole of the UK and average family spending concentrating on January to December 2010. The average household spend was £473.60 per week in 2010, up £18.60 on January to December 2009, where the average spend was £455 per week. Note that the estimates between the 2 years have not been adjusted for inflation within the UK. We can also look at the different things that families spend their money on, which we will do using this chart. We can split spending into 12 different types using internationally agreed definitions. Note there is a 13th group called Other Expenditure Items, which include spending on mortgage interest payments and council tax, which, while included in the total average spend shown earlier, is not shown on this chart. What we see is of these 12 types, on average, families spend the most on transport. In 2010, this spend was around £65 per week, and looking at some of the other areas where families tend to spend the most, we see that housing costs, excluding mortgages, were an average of £60 per week. Families spent around £58 per week on recreation and culture, and on food and non-alcoholic drink, which was around £53 per week. Plotting the other types of spending, we see the lowest amount per week was spent on health. So we showed on the previous chart that families spend an average of around £65 per week on transport in 2010. We can break this cost up, which we will do on this pie chart. What we see is that around £19.50 per week on average is spent on the purchase of vehicles, around £33 per week on the running costs of vehicles, and around £12.10 per week spent on transport services such as tube, bus, rail and airfares. So the majority of the spend on transport are the running costs of a vehicle, or just over half of the total spend. Of these running costs, around 2/3 is spent on petrol, diesel and other motor oils, at around £22 per week, up from around £19 in 2009. Finally, we will look at how spending varies across the country. To improve the reliability of these estimates, we will take an average of 3 years, over 2008 to 2010. So the UK estimate varies slightly to what was shown earlier. Bringing up this map, the average spend over the 3-year period was around £467 in the UK overall, and if we split the map up, we see that families in the North East had the lowest spend across the UK at £372.70 per week, and London the highest at £577.80 per week. If we now look at this chart, we can look at how each part of the UK compares to the average of £467 for the UK as a whole. Firstly, we see that these 5 areas spend more than the UK average, with families in London spending around £111 per week, and now looking at areas spending less, we see that of these 7 areas, families in the North East spend on average around £94 less than the UK average.